Australia will recognise the right of the Palestinian people to a state of their own. This is an opportunity to isolate Hamas. The Palestinian Authority has reaffirmed it recognises Israel's right to exist in peace and security. It has committed to demilitarise and to hold general elections.
There's no situation in which we would revoke that recognition now that it's been...
Our expectation is the international community will work with all parties.
It has pledged to abolish the system of payments to the families of prisoners and martyrs. This is the plan Australia was the first member of the United Nations to vote for back in 1947, when we proudly supported the creation of the modern State of Israel.
We have an opportunity as a nation to contribute to momentum towards two states, and that is the only prospect for peace.
Children throwing rocks with helicopter gunships, with tanks and with missiles.
They want a harmonious community, which is what we have.
To have European countries and Australia march into that, rabbit hole, just like that, fall right into it, and buy this canard is disappointing, and I think it's actually shameful.
Anthony Albanese has just done something that got Aussies across the country spitting out their morning flat whites, and not because the milk was off. No, mate, he's gone and handed the ultimate political gift to people the world's been calling bloodthirsty terrorists, all wrapped up in shiny diplomatic paper and tied with a neat little bow. And for what? So he can stand there at a podium, puff his chest out, and act like he's the peacemaker of the century? Give me a break. This isn't peace, it's political theatre with a dangerous script, and the rest of us are stuck as the unwilling extras. Before we tear into Albanese's political backflip, where the PM ditches his own conditions, gifts a win to people the world calls terrorists, and still thinks he's the hero of the UN, smash that like button like you're yanking Canberra out of its Fantasyland. Subscribe if you're done watching Australia get sold out for overseas applause. And grab the Can I Vote for a Kangaroo shirt, links in the description. You don't need to be a foreign policy guru to smell that something stinks here. We've gone from the bloke in Canberra swearing blind that hostage releases were a non-negotiable before recognition of a Palestinian state to now. What? Just quietly binning that promise and acting like it never existed? The hostages are still there, mate, some starving, some tortured, all trapped in conditions we wouldn't wish on our worst enemies, and yet our government's busy handing out symbolic victories like party favours at a school disco. If that's leadership, then my grandma's pet budgie should run for PM. And here's the kicker, Albanese reckons this recognition is going to somehow make Hamas disarm, like they'll just wake up tomorrow, see Australia's tick of approval, and go, righto boys, time to pack it in. What planet is he living on? This isn't an episode of Neighbours where everyone hugs it out in the last 5 minutes. This is the Middle East, where decades of bad blood don't get washed away by a nice press release and a handshake. But don't expect a journos to grill him on that. They sat there like nodding dashboard bobbleheads while the PM peddled fantasy after fantasy, and no one asked the most obvious question of the day. How the hell does he think these terrorists will be disarmed? Even Penny Wong's spin on it was laughable. No preconditions, just future commitments. Which is political speak for don't hold us to it, we'll see what happens. So no, the Palestinians don't actually have to do any of the things we're supposedly asking of them before they get recognition. Elections? Maybe. Stop funding terror? If they feel like it. Recognize Israel? Only if it fits the mood. And when asked whether we'd pull recognition if these promises weren't kept, Penny basically shrugged and said, nah, we'll just hope for the best. That's not diplomacy, that's handing your wallet to a bloke who just mugged you and saying, but please spend it wisely. Let's not kid ourselves here, elections in the West Bank could easily put Hamas in charge, which is one reason they haven't held them in 20 years. And even if the Palestinian Authority stays in power, this is the same mob whose leader openly boasts about paying salaries to terrorists and their families. Albanese claims they've promised to stop, but the same bloke, Mahmoud Abbas, has literally said if they only had 1 penny left, it would go to the martyrs. Martyrs. Not terrorists. You reckon that sounds like someone about to dismantle a system that rewards killing? Yeah, me neither. The historical amnesia on display here is staggering. Albanese loves to talk about 1947 and Australia's role in supporting the creation of Israel, but conveniently skips over the bit where Palestinians rejected the plan entirely and 5 Arab nations launched a war to wipe Israel off the map. He ignores that every serious two-state offer since then has been rejected. He ignores that Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005, only for the place to become a fortress of tunnels and rocket launches. And now he wants us to believe that history's going to suddenly do a backflip because Australia says so? Pull the other one, it's got bells on. And you can't help but notice the pattern. This isn't just a foreign policy shift, it's the PM ticking off his activist bucket list. Albanese's been pro-Palestinian since his megaphone-wielding protest days outside the US Embassy, where American and Israeli flags were being burnt. He co-founded the Labour Friends of Palestine. He never really moved to the political centre like he claimed, he just swapped the rally t-shirt for a suit and tie. And now, from the big chair in Canberra, he's pushing through what he's always wanted, no matter what it costs Australia's alliances or our own national security. Because let's be real, this isn't just about the Middle East, it's about how safe we are here at home. Jewish Australians are already feeling unsafe, and this move is going to light a fire under the most aggressive protest elements in the country. Albanese says we've got a harmonious community. Mate, have you seen the rallies with terrorist flags and Nazi symbols waving under the harbour bridge? That's not harmony, that's a powder keg, and today he's handed someone the matches. Even Israel's Prime Minister has called this move shameful, and while some might dismiss that as political bluster, the fact remains, this isn't going to bring peace. It's not going to change the UN vote. The US will veto it anyway, but it will change how our allies see us. We've gone from a country that stood shoulder to shoulder with the US and Israel to one that's now taking cues from the European left. And when the political winds change, as they always do, future leaders are going to look back at this and wonder how we ever thought it was a good idea. The opposition's already come out swinging, warning that this sets a dreadful precedent, rewarding terrorists for mass murder. And you know what? They're right. Because if you strip away all the diplomatic fluff, that's exactly what's happened here. Hamas pulled off the most barbaric slaughter in modern memory, and less than 2 years later, they're getting the exact political recognition they wanted. No concessions. No hostages freed. No ceasefire guaranteed. Just a shiny diplomatic win to wave around as proof that violence works. And Albanese and Penny Wong can dress it up however they like. But to the rest of the world, and to anyone in Australia with an ounce of common sense, it looks like we've just told the bullies of the world that if they hit hard enough, long enough, we'll give them what they want. And mate, that's not foreign policy. That's weakness, pure and simple. And the thing about weakness in politics, mate, is that it's never contained. It bleeds. It spreads. 1 minute you're bending the knee in the UN chamber to avoid a bit of international heat. The next you're finding the same playbook being used against you at home. You reckon other groups with an axe to grind won't look at this and think, right, so that's how you get Canberra to listen? This isn't just about Hamas. It's about setting a dangerous template where the loudest, most aggressive players in the room call the shots, and the rest of us get to live with the fallout. And it's not like we're sitting on a rock in the middle of nowhere untouched by the world. Australia's got its own social tensions simmering just under the surface, and you only need one spark to light the whole thing up. When the Prime Minister stands there and essentially rewards a group that has openly bragged about killing civilians, it sends a message that principle isn't as important as perception. That's the sort of thing that chips away at the trust people have in their leaders, and once the trust is gone, good luck getting it back. But Albanese doesn't seem to care about that. He's got his eyes on the international applause. You can almost see him imagining the handshakes with European leaders, the polite claps in the UN Assembly Hall, the glowing headlines from the same overseas media that wouldn't give two hoots if Australia burned tomorrow. It's the classic Canberra disease, playing to the world stage while forgetting who actually put you in office. And for what? For a vote at the UN that the Americans will crush with a single veto? It's like training for months to win a race, crossing the finish line, and then finding out no one was keeping score. And don't think for a second that this is just about lofty ideals or moral positioning. Politics is always about the numbers, mate, and Albanese is counting on winning over a slice of the domestic vote that'll cheer this move to the rooftops. The trouble is, he's willing to alienate the rest of the country to do it. You've got ordinary Aussies, people who've never marched in a protest or waved a flag for either side, now wondering whether their own government would throw them under the bus if it made for good optics overseas. That's the real damage, when average people start feeling like pawns in a game they never signed up to play. Now let's talk about the absolute lunacy of believing this move is going to bring any kind of peace. Every single time in modern history that recognition or concessions have been handed over without rock-solid guarantees, it's been twisted into propaganda for the extremists. They don't see it as an invitation to the table. They see it as proof their tactics work. October 7th wasn't an accident, and it wasn't just some tragic blip in history. It was deliberate, brutal, and designed to send a message. And now, less than 2 years later, the same people who masterminded that bloodbath are watching a Western leader give them exactly what they wanted. It's the kind of move that makes you wonder whether anyone in Canberra's war gained the consequences. You reckon Hamas will go, "Cheers for the recognition, Australia, we'll knock it off now"? Or is it more likely they'll use this as a shiny PR win to rally more support, raise more money, and dig in even harder? And when they do, when the next round of violence inevitably erupts, how will Albanese explain to the families of the victims that his big play for peace actually fueled the fire? That's the thing about symbolic gestures. They're cheap in the moment, but bloody expensive down the line. And what about our alliances? We've spent decades cultivating a position as a trusted partner to the US, a reliable voice in the Pacific, a country that stands with its mates in the tough times. Now, in one swoop, Albanese has gone and undercut that reputation. You can bet Washington's watching this with narrowed eyes. They've already made it clear they're not on board, and yet here we are, dancing to the tune of European governments who couldn't care less if the Pacific security balance tips against us. That's not strategic, that's short-sighted. You'd think the first meeting with the newly re-elected US President, Donald Trump, love him or hate him, would be the priority. But no, Albanese is off to meet with Mahmoud Abbas before he's even had a sit-down with our most important ally. That's not just bad optics. That's a diplomatic slap in the face. And what message does that send to Beijing, to Moscow, to every other player looking to test Australia's resolve? It says a foreign policy is up for negotiation if the right ideological buttons get pressed. And let's not sugarcoat this, foreign policy decisions have a direct knock-on effect here at home. Jewish Australians are already facing a wave of intimidation, threats, and outright violence. When you've got protests under the harbour bridge with terrorist flags flapping in the breeze and Nazi symbols scrawled on placards, you'd think the government might be looking for ways to cool things down. Instead, this move is like tossing petrol on the barbecue and hoping for the best. And when things turn ugly, because they will, you won't see Albanese or Wong standing out there on the front lines. They'll be safe in their press rooms, talking about dialogue and shared humanity while ordinary Aussies cop the fallout. The thing that really gets under my skin, though, is the sheer arrogance of thinking that Australia, of all countries, can wave a magic wand over a conflict that's been raging for generations. We're not a global superpower. We're not the main player in the Middle East. Our strength has always been in knowing where we can make a real difference and where we're just playing at diplomacy. But Albanese has decided that now's the time for Australia to rewrite the rulebook, except he's not actually rewriting anything. He's just scribbling our name under someone else's failed play. And while he's off chasing this fantasy, there are real, urgent issues here in Australia that are being left to rot. Cost of living's gone through the roof, housing affordability's a sick joke, rural communities are crying out for infrastructure, and our defence capabilities are stretched thinner than a servo meat pie at midnight. But instead of tackling those, we're busy handing out moral participation ribbons on the other side of the planet. It's not just misplaced priorities, it's a betrayal of the people who actually voted this government in. Even if you set aside the moral and security arguments, the basic logic here doesn't hold water. Recognition without conditions isn't leverage, it's surrender. It's telling the other side they can have the prize without running the race. And once you've set that precedent, you can't walk it back. If the promised reforms don't happen, and history tells us they won't, Australia's not going to suddenly revoke recognition. That would be politically impossible, which means this isn't just a gamble. It's locking ourselves into a position with no exit strategy. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Albanese knows this is irreversible and wants it that way. Once the ink's dry, no future government can undo it without looking like they're tearing up a peace deal. It's the kind of cynical, long-game move that politicians pull when they're more interested in shaping their legacy than serving their people. But here's the thing about legacies, they're written by history, not by your own press releases. And history's got a nasty habit of being brutally honest. And here's where it all comes full circle, mate. Because when you strip away the UN speeches, the diplomatic backslapping, and the carefully staged photo ops, you're left with the bare bones of the thing. Australia's national interest has been shoved to the back seat so Albanese can tick a box on his ideological wish list. That's the raw truth. It's not about peace, it's not about justice, and it's sure as hell not about making life better for the average Aussie. It's about political branding. About looking good in the history books he's already writing in his head, even if the chapters after his term are a bloody mess. And I reckon deep down, he knows this move won't change the facts on the ground in Gaza or the West Bank one bit. Recognition isn't going to make Hamas dismantle its rocket factories. It's not going to erase decades of propaganda pumped into Palestinian schools. It's not going to undo the corruption and brutality of the Palestinian Authority, who've had more foreign aid cash than some small countries' GDPs and still can't keep the lights on without someone else footing the bill. What it will do, without a doubt, is give a morale boost to the people who see violence as a winning strategy. That's the reality, no matter how many times Albanese tries to spin it as a step toward momentum for peace. And here at home, the ripple effect's already starting. You can feel it in the tone of the protests, see it in the way online rhetoric is getting nastier by the day. This isn't calming anything down, it's hardening positions. Jewish Australians who've already been spat on, shoved, or threatened are now wondering if their own government's on their side anymore. And the loudest pro-Palestinian activists? They've just been handed a political victory they can point to as proof that their tactics, from mass marches to public disruption, work. That's a dangerous lesson to teach anyone, especially when tensions are already this high. And don't think for a second this is going unnoticed overseas. Our allies are watching. Washington's watching. And in capitals like Beijing and Moscow, they're taking notes. Because moves like this send signals, and the signal here is that Australia's foreign policy can be swayed by ideology over strategy. That we're willing to throw a long-standing ally under the bus for the sake of symbolic politics. That we can be split from the US and pulled toward the European left if the right arguments are whispered in the right ears. You think that's not going to be exploited in future negotiations? Pull the other one. This is the thing with symbolic decisions, they're not harmless. They're not just statements of principle floating in a vacuum. They're a kind of political gravity, pulling everything else into their orbit. Once you've made them, they shape your relationships, your credibility, your security posture. And this one? This one plants Australia firmly in the camp of governments willing to reward violent actors without securing a single tangible concession in return. We've joined the list of countries willing to hand over political capital for free, and mate, once you give it away for nothing, good luck ever getting it back. And let's not ignore the insult this throws at Australians who believe in fairness, who believe in earning your wins. It's like watching a footy team lose every single match, play dirty, and then still get handed the premiership trophy because someone reckons it might make them behave better next season. It's absurd, it's insulting, and it spits in the face of the idea that you don't get rewarded for bad behavior. That's a principle most of us learned in kindy. Shame our Prime Minister skipped that lesson. If Albanese truly cared about peace, real, durable peace, he'd be using Australia's voice to push for real conditions, real commitments, and real consequences if those commitments aren't met. He'd be talking about timelines, verification, and accountability, not vague promises about future cooperation that anyone with a pulse knows will evaporate the second the ink's dry. But that's the thing, real diplomacy is hard. It's messy. It doesn't fit neatly into a press release or a soundbite. And it sure doesn't get you quick applause from the people whose approval you're chasing. So here we are. A country that once stood proud as a steady, reliable voice on the global stage, now caught up in a feel-good gesture that's going to do more harm than good. A Prime Minister who's more interested in his global image than the safety and security of his own people. And a political class too timid to stand up and call it what it is, weakness dressed up as principle. History won't remember this as a turning point for peace. It'll remember it as a turning point for Australia's credibility, and not in a good way. And the saddest part? We didn't even get anything for it. No hostages freed. No violence stopped. No ironclad commitments to change. Just a round of applause from a few countries that wouldn't lift a finger to help us if the tables were turned. We've traded our leverage for nothing but the warm fuzzies of being able to say we did something. But when the something you do makes things worse, mate, it's better to do nothing at all. See you in the next one, and don't forget to slap that like button like it just sold off your local hospital to pay for another overseas junket. Oi, and if you're really fired up, grab the "Can I vote for a kangaroo" shirt. Wear it to the next rate hike meeting, the next protest, or just your local cafe when you're forking out $9 for a flat white while wondering why your tax dollars are fixing someone else's country instead of ours. Stay loud, stay awake, and never stop fighting for the Australia we bloody deserve.